Coming up, an interview that you will only see on The Story with independent presidential candidate RFK Jr. and voters who are still dealing with the impact of 1 year ago's toxic train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. You will hear their voices. They are very powerful, I promise you. They will speak about how they feel about their government, about the response, all of that coming up next. And RFK Jr. is in that conversation. Then you'll hear our one-on-one coming up.
If I get elected in November, I'm going to find the people who are responsible for this. And I'm going to identify them. Why were you doing that? Who told you to do that? Who told you to avoid finding stuff? I'm going to find out who those people are, and I'm going to hold them responsible.
Was the site of one of the worst environmental disasters in decades. East Palestine, Ohio, a town with a population of less than 5,000 people, where on February 3rd of last year, a Norfolk Southern train barreling through town as it does every 9 minutes. This one was around 9 p.m. that night. A wheel bearing overheated, came off, derailing 53 train cars carrying vinyl chloride and other chemicals, spewing them into the air and the ground. And then 3 days later, officials made the determination that rather than risk an explosion, they were going to do a controlled burn, a decision that many residents believe was devastating to their health and their property. Shortly after that, they were told it's safe. You can head back home now. So we were on the ground yesterday in East Palestine, where I was joined by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., an environmental lawyer for more than 40 years. He is now an independent candidate for the presidency of the United States. He is also of counsel with a firm that represents some of the victims in this case, not the people that we spoke to there, but in this case, their cases against Norfolk Southern. We sat down with the residents, which include people from Pennsylvania. So we got a take from Ohio and Pennsylvania voters just a few miles away over the border. Watch this. Let me start with Lori and Wayne, who actually are joining us from Pennsylvania today, but you're just 3.5 miles away, right?
Yes, correct. That's correct, yes.
What can you tell us?
Well, when it happened, we were dumbfounded. We didn't know what was going on, but all we heard was sirens. We was all in bed. Fast forward, we started getting burning lips, watery eyes, nauseated, and dry mouth, dry lips. Fast forward 18 weeks after the train was blown up, unnecessarily, I might add. That's been proven. I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So July 10th of 2023, I had to have a double mastectomy. Since then, I've gone through 4 rounds of chemotherapy. Our daughter, who's 24 years old, she's asking us questions like, am I going to be allowed, can I have children after this? We don't have the answers. We don't know. She's due to be tested as well next month.
She fears cancer, and she does ask us, am I going to be okay? Am I going to be able to have children? Am I going to get cancer? We can't answer those questions for her because we don't know.
I just want to play a soundbite. This is President Biden, who has just visited recently, about a year later. Let's listen to this.
Let me be clear. While there are acts of God, this was an act of greed that was 100% preventable. Let me say it again. An act of greed that was 100% preventable. We know multi-million-dollar railroad companies transporting toxic chemicals have a responsibility to do it safely. And again, Norfolk Southern failed.
What's your reaction when you listen to that, Linda?
I honestly don't know. I really don't believe anything anybody says anymore. I don't think anyone is genuine. And, Biden had gone on to say, as far as that sound clip, he went on to say that we're going to continue receiving the assistance that they've been providing all along. We're not getting assistance from local government, from county, from state, from federal. We're not getting anything. So basically what he said is we're going to keep doing nothing.
What do you say to that, Mr. Kennedy?
I like President Biden's pledge that he's going to hold Norfolk Southern responsible. But this occurred because of a failure of government. Norfolk Southern was paying its executives 80% of their salary comes from reducing costs. That's where their bonuses come from. The company should be criminally charged for what it did to this community. It was an act of theft. It stole the property values. It stole the health. It stole the pursuit of happiness from this, this wonderful community.
They stole our lives.
Yeah, it stole the lives of people.
All of you were nodding your heads, but how does it impact how you look at this election?
You know, we have seen so many people that have come through this community over the last year, and many of them have been just self-serving. They've used this as an opportunity for their own personal and professional growth and not anything genuine. We have seen a few. We have seen a few genuine folks come in that have wanted to help us. But we're so tired of hearing they're going to make it right. That we want specifics.
You know, our human health. It's not a red issue. It's not a blue issue. This is an issue of human lives.
Yes.
You know, politics has no business in this issue when it comes to children's lives. You know, and the thing that I say, kind of what Cheney was saying, boots on the ground, that's the problem, is they don't know what's going on in the ground at the federal level. You know, you have to be connected to the people.
Let me ask you a question, Mr. Kennedy. If this happened and you were president, what would you do? On day one, do you evacuate the town? Do you let people go back? What do you do?
Well, preliminarily, we need to unravel the corporate capture at DOT that allowed this to happen. And, you know, right now, President Biden says that he's going to fix this problem and hold them responsible. Why isn't the Attorney General investigating this and filing criminal charges? This is a crime. What happened here? This whole town is a crime scene. I mean, what I would love to see President Biden say is to come in and say, you know, this happened because of a failure of government. This happened because these agencies are captured, they're corrupt, and I'm not going to tolerate it anymore. And I'm going to expose the people and fire the people who are not doing the proper testing. I'm going to prosecute the people who are responsible at the outset, instead of kind of a vague promise that we're going to take care of everybody.
I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I'm grateful for your time and sharing your stories here. There's nothing like meeting people who have been through this firsthand and helping all of us understand your story, so thank you. Yeah, they talked about the fact that they believe that the EPA is basically in bed with Norfolk Southern. So they do the tests and they say, oh, the tests all came back fine. Then they bring in their own independent testers who give them different information. So you can see why they are so frustrated. We asked Norfolk Southern for an update on how they're helping the residents of East Palestine. They told the story, quote, we have been on the ground in East Palestine and the surrounding communities since day one. We made a promise to make it right. We're keeping our promises. To date, the company has committed $104 million to the community, completed major remediation work, and is making progress on long-term health, water, and housing commitments, according to the company. But you can actually hear the whole conversation, which I really encourage you to do. It is very compelling. And more of my interview with RFK Jr. and what he says about President Biden's fitness for office and also his efforts to secure the southern border. That is next.
We should end the catch and release program and have a catch and return program at the border.
And build a wall? Independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. from his battle to get on the ballot in more states, the accusations that he is a spoiler candidate, and what he would do about what he says is the crisis at the border. He has been there twice in recent months. So you're on 3 state ballots right now. How are you going to get on the others? I know you've started your own We the People party, and then there's a libertarian area where you could get on ballots in that way as well. What's the plan and how quickly will it happen?
We're going to be announcing new states every week from now on. We're way ahead of our benchmarks. We will be on the ballot in 50 states and the District of Columbia. We have, I think we have 80,000 volunteers now on the ground. We're finding it extraordinarily easy, actually, to persuade people to sign, and we're ahead of all of our expectations.
What do you say to those who say you're just a spoiler? You were very critical of Ralph Nader back in 2000. You wrote a piece in the New York Times criticizing him and saying that he was going to hurt the environment by handing the election to George W. Bush. So what do you say now to those who say that you're in the same position?
I hope to be a spoiler for both President Trump and President Biden. I hope to take votes from each of them and win the election.
So you don't consider yourself a spoiler?
No, I'm not in here to do anything except to win.
President Biden was in an ice cream shop, and he was asked about Gaza, and he said, while eating ice cream, oh, there's going to be a ceasefire by the weekend. No, not by the weekend, by right after the weekend. And it's not the first time that we've heard him take on serious foreign policy issues in that kind of light environment. We don't hear from him a lot in terms of laying out his thinking on some of these big foreign policy issues. What do you think about his candidacy at this point?
I think he needs to come out of the White House and show Americans that he has the cognitive capacity to, and the mental acuity to handle this job at probably the most challenging time now, at least in recent American history. We're facing issues that are existential. We're involved in 2 wars. We have AI coming down, which is going to change everything, and there's enormous dangers in it. We need we have an economic crisis in this country where, the middle class is disappearing. It's been torpedoed. Where 57% of Americans can't put their hands on $1,000, where an entire generation of kids cannot buy a home. This is a crisis. We need a president who is thinking about these things, who is articulating the solution for the American people.
Do you not have confidence that he can serve?
I think he needs to show Americans that he, a lot of these decisions are the products of complex and nuanced thought, and those thoughts need to be articulated to the American people in a way that we all support him. And I do not think that that's happening now. Our children's lives are dependent on that 3:00 a.m. call, and we need to know that we have a president who can wake up in the middle of the night and who is on his feet and thinking about those things. And I think a lot of Americans have lost confidence in that.
So you're saying you don't think he's actually in charge?
You know what? I have a personal issue, which is my Secret Service protection. And I've known President Biden for 40 years, and he was a friend. With all of the issues about him, he was somebody who I thought at least had a kind of fundamental decency. And the fact, I just don't believe that he would have personally made the decision to deny me for Secret Service protection. I think somebody else is making those decisions.
You've been supportive of Israel's battle in Gaza. What about now? Would you be encouraging Israel to stop the bombing in Gaza, or do you support, as Bibi Netanyahu has called for this week, that they have to finish the job and eliminate Hamas?
Well, I think Israel, like every other nation, has a right to defend itself. I think we have to come down to the fact that Hamas has said we don't want to negotiate. We want only one thing, which is the annihilation of Israel, the extermination of Jews in this part of the world. So I think, I'm not a fan of Bibi Netanyahu's. I don't think most Israelis are. I think he would be voted out, but I think most Israelis are overwhelmed. Israel is today unified because they feel embattled. They feel that this is an existential risk to them. I think it's a complex issue and it's not easy, but we have to look at how do you avoid civilian deaths over the long term, not just immediately.
There's some discussion that Joe Biden, the president, could lose the vote in Michigan based on a stance that's very similar to the one that you just presented, because he could lose 200,000 Muslim voters in Michigan. Michigan's a state that you think you just put on the list of when you might be able to win. Is that going to hurt you there?
I think, we need to make that distinction that Hamas is not the friend of the Palestinian people. Hamas is the abuser of the Palestinian people, and we need to point to Hamas, when we see civilian deaths happening, which are horrific and unacceptable, we need to understand that, that Hamas is at fault.
Let me ask you this. With regard to the border, there is a battle on Capitol Hill right now that many conservatives believe that you should secure the border before you send another dollar to help Ukraine. Do you agree with that?
I think the Ukraine war should be ended. And I think I wouldn't necessarily couple those issues, but I think the Ukraine war is a war of choice, that it's a war that's easily settled, and that we should not be spending any more money in Ukraine. We need that money here.
Do you believe that any person who has crossed the border and commits a crime should be deported from this country?
Of course. Of course they should be deported. And the major thing is to shut down the border, which we can do pretty much overnight. And that, through a combination of policy of reinstating the Migrant Protection Act, which requires people who are coming through with asylum claims that their case be adjudicated in Mexico, not the United States. We should end the catch and release program and have a catch and return program at the border.
And build a wall?
We need the wall. We need a physical barrier as a wall in the urban areas and places where migrants can disappear very quickly. And then we need other infrastructure, including monitoring, long-range cameras, lights, fences, and a lot of the other areas. You don't need to put a wall 2,200 miles from Brownsville, Texas to San Diego, but you need monitoring systems. And we had those in place, and the Biden administration dismantled them.
So a lot more there, and you can hear the entire discussion with the panel in East Palestine and also my one-on-one with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on the Untold Story podcast. That's going to be available. Both of those will be available. A double podcast drop this Friday. I encourage you to listen to it at foxnewspodcasts.com.